The world admires the person who is always available, not because they respect them, but because they can rely on them without effort. The one who answers instantly, the one who never says no, the one who absorbs everyone else's chaos and calls it kindness. And slowly, without realizing it, that person becomes background noise. Essential maybe, appreciated, rarely, respected, even less. You've felt it. That quiet resentment when your loyalty is assumed. That subtle frustration when your time is treated like it costs nothing. The Stoics warned about this long ago. When you place your worth in the hands of others, you hand them control over your peace. If your reactions are predictable, they become exploitable. And if your value is constantly discounted, it is because you allowed the price to drop. There is another way to live, not colder, not arrogant, but sovereign, guarded with intention, disciplined with access, anchored in self-respect. If you're here, you already sense that something needs to shift. Stay with me. And if this path of Stoic strength and inner sovereignty speaks to you, please subscribe as a commitment to becoming the kind of person who cannot be casually consumed by the world. You have probably felt it before, that quiet sting when someone cancels on you at the last minute, as if your time were flexible and endless. That moment when your effort goes unnoticed because it was expected. That strange emptiness when your loyalty is assumed instead of appreciated. It is subtle, but it lingers. And if you are honest, it does not hurt because they cancelled. It hurts because something inside you was hoping that your availability would secure your importance. Somewhere along the way, you traded value for validation. You believed that answering instantly meant you mattered, that always saying yes meant you were dependable, that explaining yourself in detail would finally make people understand you. But when your worth depends on how others respond, you are no longer standing on your own ground. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The moment you tie your value to outside approval, you quietly surrender that power. You begin adjusting your behavior to chase reactions instead of acting from conviction. And slowly, without meaning to, you become abundant. Always there, always ready, always responding. Abundance without discernment does not create appreciation. It creates neglect. This is not cruelty, it is human psychology. When something is constantly available, it loses weight. If you are like oxygen in the room, no one thanks you for being there. They only notice when you are gone. That is why the first shift cannot be external. It must be internal. It is not about playing games or becoming distant out of bitterness. It is about changing the question you ask yourself. Stop asking how you can be liked. Start asking where your presence is actually earned. That shift in focus changes your posture. It changes the way you enter conversations. It changes the way you respond to requests. When you no longer feel the need to secure your place by constant availability, your energy becomes calmer, slower, more deliberate. You begin to realize that respect is rarely given to what is free and constant. It is given to what is steady and self-contained. And that steadiness comes from knowing that your worth is not determined by how quickly someone replies to you or how loudly they praise you. It comes from discipline over your own mind. The truth is that when you chase validation, you place yourself in a marketplace where the price is always unstable. One day you feel valued, the next day you feel ignored. And your emotions rise and fall with every small interaction. But when you anchor your value internally, something shifts. You no longer panic when someone pulls away. You no longer overextend to keep people close. You become more selective with your time, not because you are superior, but because you understand that your energy is limited, and limited resources require intention. This is where real self-respect begins. It is quiet. It does not announce itself. It simply refuses to discount itself. When you stop flooding the world with your presence, the world starts to feel your absence, and in that space, your weight becomes noticeable. That is not manipulation. It is alignment. You are no longer bending to be accepted. You are standing to be respected. And that standing does not require aggression. It requires clarity. Clarity about what you tolerate. Clarity about how you respond. Clarity about who gets access to your time and who does not. The more clarity you develop, the less reactive you become. Instead of rushing to fix misunderstandings, you allow silence to do its work. Instead of proving your worth through constant effort, you let your actions speak over time. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming centered. When you are centered, you do not chase. You choose. You do not overexplain. You decide. You do not beg for appreciation. You observe who naturally offers it, and that observation becomes your filter. From that point forward, your posture shifts subtly but powerfully. You listen more carefully, you commit more selectively, you detach more calmly, and people begin to sense that you are not easily moved. That sense of groundedness is what changes the dynamic. Not force, not words, just presence with weight. And once you feel that weight within yourself, you realize something important. You were never meant to secure your place by being endlessly available. You were meant to build a place that does not depend on constant approval. That is where strength lives, not in how many people applaud you, but in how little you need them to. And when that realization settles in, your behavior naturally adjusts. You respond slower, you speak with more intention, you give without overgiving, you care without clinging. You offer loyalty without surrendering self-respect. The sting you once felt when overlooked begins to fade because you are no longer measuring yourself by someone else's attention. You are measuring yourself by your own standards. And that is the beginning of becoming expensive in the only way that truly matters. Think about your time for a moment, not in theory, but in the small daily moments that shape your life. How quickly do you respond when your phone lights up? How often do you rearrange your plans to fit someone else's convenience, even when they would not do the same for you? How many conversations do you sit through, nodding politely, while your energy quietly drains away? These are not dramatic sacrifices. They are subtle leaks, and over time, they empty you. Time is the one resource you never get back. Yet many people treat it as if it were endless, handing it out in small pieces until nothing feels protected. The truth is simple. If your calendar is open to everyone, your life belongs to everyone. And when your life belongs to everyone, you begin to feel strangely disconnected from yourself. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That line carries more weight than it seems at first glance. To guard your time, you must be willing to be misunderstood. When you slow down your responses, some people will notice. When you stop explaining every decision, they may call you distant. When you say no without adding a long apology, they may call you cold. And that is the moment that tests you, because the old version of you wants to fix their perception. It wants to clarify. It wants to soften the edge, but improvement requires discomfort. Growth often looks like distance to those who benefited from your constant availability. If you are serious about becoming stronger, you have to let them think what they think. Scarcity is not rudeness, it is discipline. It is the quiet understanding that your energy is limited and should be directed with intention. When you begin to guard your schedule, something subtle shifts. You are no longer reacting to every request. You are evaluating it. Does this align with my priorities? Does this deserve my attention? That pause creates space, and in that space your self-respect grows. You do not need to announce your boundaries. You do not need to defend them in long speeches. Silence can communicate more than explanations ever could. When you calmly decline an invitation without drama, when you take hours instead of seconds to respond, when you protect your focus instead of scattering it, you send a message without saying a word. There is something here worth protecting. People feel that shift. They may not articulate it, but they sense it. When access to you is no longer automatic, it becomes intentional. When you are not constantly available, your presence gains weight. You stop being background noise and start becoming a deliberate choice. And this is not about playing games or creating artificial distance. It is about alignment. If you claim your time matters but treat it as disposable, your actions contradict your values. But when you treat your time as valuable, others slowly adjust to that standard. They begin to schedule around you instead of assuming you will bend. They begin to appreciate moments with you because those moments are not endless. There is also a deeper shift happening inside you. When you stop overcommitting, you create space for your own growth. You have time to think, time to reflect, time to pursue goals that require focus and consistency. Instead of living in reaction mode, you begin living with intention, and intention builds confidence. You start to feel less rushed, less anxious, less scattered. Your decisions become clearer because they are not pressured by the fear of disappointing others. That clarity changes your posture in subtle ways. You speak more slowly, you choose more carefully, you feel less desperate to fill silence, and the calmer you become, the more grounded you appear. Of course, not everyone will respond positively. Some people prefer the version of you that was always available. They may test your boundaries. They may push. They may try to pull you back into old habits. That is where discipline becomes strength. It is easy to guard your time once. It is harder to guard it consistently. But consistency is what builds reputation. Over time, people adjust to the new rhythm. They stop expecting instant replies. They stop assuming automatic yes. They begin to recognize that your attention is earned, not guaranteed. And something interesting happens. The more you protect your time, the more valuable it feels to you. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to appreciate the quiet hours that once felt lonely. You realize that being alone with your thoughts is not emptiness, but restoration. That realization makes you less dependent on constant interaction. And when you are less dependent, you become less controllable. Your choices are guided by purpose, not pressure. This is how value rises quietly, not through loud declarations or dramatic gestures, but through consistent, disciplined action. Guarding your time signals that your life has direction. It signals that you are building something, even if others cannot see it yet. You do not have to explain what you are building. The fact that you are protecting it is enough, and as that protection becomes a habit, it shapes your identity. You are no longer the person who rearranges everything to be accepted. You are the person who arranges your life around what truly matters. When you look back, you may realize that the people who truly respect you are the ones who adapted without resentment. They did not demand constant access. They valued quality over quantity. Those are the connections that last, because they are based on mutual respect, not convenience. And as your time becomes more intentional, your presence naturally becomes more meaningful. The world responds to what is guarded with care. And as you continue to protect your time, you begin to understand that rising in value is not about becoming unreachable. It is about becoming deliberate. And that deliberateness sets the tone for everything that follows. Now let's go deeper, because guarding your time is only part of the shift. The next layer is your words. Pay attention to how people communicate today. Every frustration is posted. Every small victory is announced. Every emotional wave is shared in real time. Plans are revealed before they are built. Goals are declared before they are disciplined. And then, after all that noise, they wonder why their presence feels light. They wonder why their words do not move anyone anymore. The truth is simple. When everything is said, nothing feels significant. When every thought is shared, no thought feels rare. And rarity is what gives things weight. Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free." Real bravery is not loud. It does not shout its plans into the world for approval. It does not seek applause for every small step. Bravery is controlled. It is measured. It knows when to speak and when to stay silent. It understands that freedom comes from mastery over impulse. including the impulse to explain, to justify, to narrate every detail of your inner life. Many people think that constant expression equals authenticity, but authenticity without discipline becomes exposure, and exposure without intention reduces value. When you speak less, your words naturally carry more force. When you reveal selectively, you create a quiet sense of depth. That depth is not manipulation, it is psychological gravity. Have you ever noticed how the quiet person in a room often draws more attention than the one who speaks non-stop? The loud voice may dominate the sound, but it rarely commands respect. The quiet voice, when it finally enters the conversation, changes the atmosphere. People pause. They listen more carefully. That is not magic. It is scarcity. Rarity creates focus. If something appears constantly, the mind adjusts to it and begins to filter it out. But when something appears occasionally and intentionally, the mind leans in. It assigns importance. The same rule applies to you. If you narrate your entire life to everyone, there is nothing left to discover. There is no space for curiosity. But when you hold parts of yourself in reserve, when you allow some silence between statements, people invest attention. And wherever attention is invested, value increases. This does not mean becoming secretive or cold. It means becoming deliberate. Before you speak, ask yourself whether the words are necessary. Are they adding clarity, or are they filling silence? Are they strengthening your position, or are they exposing your insecurity? Many times the urge to overshare comes from the desire to be understood immediately. You want people to know your reasons, your struggles, your strategy. But immediate understanding is not always required. In fact, constant explanation often lowers your perceived confidence. When you justify every decision, you subtly communicate doubt. When you calmly state your direction without over-explaining, you communicate certainty. That certainty feels expensive because it is not begging for approval. Words are currency. Like any currency, they lose power when inflated. If you constantly promise, constantly complain, constantly declare, your verbal currency becomes common. People stop taking it seriously. But when you speak with intention, when you choose your statements carefully and let silence do part of the work, your words regain strength. They begin to feel measured and considered. This changes how others respond to you. Instead of reacting casually, they process what you say. They remember it. They refer back to it. Your presence becomes heavier, not because you are louder, but because you are precise. There is also something happening internally. When you stop broadcasting every thought, you create space to refine them. Silence allows ideas to mature. It allows emotions to settle before they become public. This protects your reputation. It also protects your peace. Not every frustration needs an audience. Not every plan needs validation. The more selective you become, the more stable you feel. You are no longer reacting in real time to every emotion. You are observing, processing, deciding. That internal control reflects outward. People sense when someone is not easily shaken. They sense when someone does not rush to fill every gap with words. Over time, this discipline builds quiet authority. You do not need to dominate conversations to influence them. You do not need to reveal everything to be respected. In fact, the opposite is often true. When you speak rarely but clearly, when you share thoughtfully rather than impulsively, you create an atmosphere of depth. People begin to assume there is more beneath the surface, and often there is, because you have given yourself the time and silence to develop it. So speak carefully, not to appear superior, not to create artificial mystery, but to preserve your currency. Let your actions speak longer than your announcements. Let your results appear before your explanations. Let some things remain private until they are solid. Words, like time, are limited, and when you treat them as limited, others begin to treat them as valuable. As you learn to guard your speech with the same discipline you apply to your schedule, you will notice something shifting again. Your presence feels steadier. Your influence feels stronger. And that steady strength prepares you for the next layer of control, the one that shapes everything else beneath the surface. Then there is something even deeper than your time and your words, your emotional reaction. This is the most expensive asset you own, yet most people give it away for free. Watch what happens in ordinary situations. Someone says something sharp, and a reaction explodes instantly. Someone pulls back their attention, and anxiety rises. Someone offers praise, and confidence spikes. Their emotional state shifts depending on what others do. That is not strength. That is dependency. If your mood can be controlled by every comment, every tone, every small change in behavior, then your inner world is rented out to the public. And when your inner world is rented out, it becomes unstable. The Stoics had a word for the kind of control that changes everything: apatheia. Not apathy, not coldness, but mastery. The ability to feel emotion without being ruled by it, to experience anger without being consumed by it, to experience disappointment without collapsing under it. This kind of control is rare because it requires self-observation. It requires you to pause when your instinct screams to react. It requires you to notice the surge in your chest, the tightening in your jaw, the impulse to defend yourself immediately. Most people never build that pause. They move from stimulus to reaction in seconds, and because they react so predictably, they become easy to provoke. When someone insults you and you remain steady, something shifts in the room. The expected explosion does not arrive. The dynamic changes. When chaos surrounds you and you stay composed, you become the stable point others orient around. You are no longer pulled into every emotional storm. Instead, you stand at the center of it. This steadiness carries weight. People may not be able to explain it, but they sense it. They sense when someone is not easily shaken. They sense when someone does not need to defend themselves loudly to feel secure. That quiet control communicates strength more clearly than any speech ever could. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." That insight is powerful. It means that your reaction is not forced upon you. It is chosen, even if the choice happens quickly and unconsciously. The insult itself is just sound. The delay in a message is just silence. The raised voice is just vibration in the air. What disturbs you is the story you attach to it. Once you understand this, you regain power. You realize that you can question the story before you react. You can interrupt the automatic script that says, "I must respond now." That interruption is where mastery begins. This kind of control is difficult because it goes against instinct. When someone challenges you, your ego wants to protect itself. When someone dismisses you, your pride wants to fight back. When someone ignores you, your insecurity wants reassurance. Conquering those impulses requires discipline. It requires you to be honest about your triggers. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Instead of focusing only on the person who provoked you, you begin to ask what part of you was touched. Was it pride, fear, a need for approval? That reflection turns irritation into information, and information strengthens you. Calmness under pressure is expensive because it costs effort. It costs self-control. It costs humility. You have to admit that not every situation requires your defense. You have to accept that silence is sometimes more powerful than a perfect comeback. When you refuse to react impulsively, you deny others the emotional transaction they expect. Many provocations are attempts to extract a reaction. When you do not provide it, the dynamic weakens. The other person is left with their own noise, and you remain steady. This does not mean suppressing emotion. It means managing it. You still feel disappointment, you still feel anger, but you choose when and how to express it. You do not allow it to control your behavior. Over time, this consistency builds reputation. People begin to see you as grounded, They learn that pushing your buttons does not work. They learn that your mood is not easily manipulated. That realization changes how they approach you. It increases respect quietly. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Notice the urge to respond immediately. Breathe. Create space between the trigger and your action. Ask yourself whether this situation deserves your energy. Often it does not. Often the strongest response is no response at all. Silence can feel uncomfortable at first. It may feel like you are losing, but in many cases you are gaining control, and control over yourself is the foundation of every other form of value. As this discipline becomes natural, you will notice that your reactions slow down. Your emotions become clearer. You feel less drained after interactions because you are no longer fighting every small battle. Your energy is preserved for what truly matters. That preservation increases your presence. It adds weight to your character. And as you learn to guard your reactions with the same care you give to your time and your words, you step into a different kind of strength, one that shapes every decision that follows. Now consider something even more uncomfortable, yet deeply empowering. What happens when you are truly willing to walk away? Not in anger, not in drama, not with a speech or a slammed door. Just calmly, confidently, without noise. There is a quiet power in that posture that most people never develop. They stay, they tolerate, they compromise again and again, hoping that patience will eventually be rewarded. But when you remain in situations where your standards are not met, you send a message, even if you never say it out loud. You signal that your standards are flexible, and flexible standards invite low offers. People rarely rise above the level you accept. They adjust to it. Aristotle once observed that dignity does not come from possessing honors, but from deserving them. That idea cuts deep. If you accept less than you deserve out of fear, you chip away at your own dignity. Each time you stay in a job that drains you because you are afraid of uncertainty, each time you tolerate disrespect because you fear being alone, you teach yourself that comfort is more important than self-respect. And over time, that lesson becomes internal. You begin to believe that you cannot demand more, that you must settle, that you must endure. But endurance without boundaries is not strength, it is surrender. The ability to walk away changes the entire equation. When you cultivate the option to leave, you stop negotiating from desperation. You move from needing to selecting. That shift is subtle, but it transforms everything. A person who needs approval will accept almost any offer. A person who is selecting weighs the offer carefully. One negotiates downward to avoid loss. The other negotiates upward because loss is not frightening. The difference is not arrogance, it is self-trust. When you know that you can survive on your own standards, you no longer cling to what diminishes you. This is not about rejecting everything at the first sign of discomfort. It is about recognizing patterns. If your voice is consistently ignored, if your boundaries are repeatedly crossed, if your effort is constantly undervalued, you must decide what that means. Staying silently communicates consent. Leaving communicates clarity, and clarity builds value. People sense when someone is not afraid to withdraw. They sense when someone chooses peace over validation. That kind of detachment can feel risky at first. You may wonder if walking away will cost you connection, opportunity, security. It might. But what does staying cost you? When you know deeply that your peace is more valuable than approval, you stop chasing reassurance. You stop bending your standards to fit someone else's expectations. You begin to evaluate situations differently. Does this align with who I am becoming? Does this respect my time, my energy, my effort? If the answer is no, you do not need a dramatic exit. You simply reduce your presence. You step back. You redirect your attention. That calm withdrawal speaks louder than confrontation ever could. There is something paradoxical about this process. The less desperate you are to keep something, the more others respect you. It is not because you are playing games. It is because people value what is not clinging to them. When they sense that you can function without their approval, their leverage decreases. They can no longer control you with promises or threats. That independence creates gravity. It shifts the dynamic quietly but decisively. Developing this ability requires preparation. You cannot walk away confidently if you have built your life on a single source of validation or income. You strengthen your position by diversifying your skills, building internal stability, and creating alternatives. The stronger your foundation, the easier it becomes to leave what does not align. That preparation is not visible to everyone, but it is felt. You move differently when you know you have options. Your tone changes, your posture changes. You stop over-explaining, you stop overcompensating. You simply state your standard and allow others to decide if they can meet it. There will be moments when leaving feels lonely. Familiarity, even when unhealthy, can feel safer than uncertainty. But growth often requires stepping into that uncertainty. When you release something that diminishes you, you create space. At first, that space may feel empty, but emptiness is not loss. It is potential. It is room for something better aligned. And when you hold that space without rushing to fill it with whatever appears first, you reinforce your own worth. Over time, this pattern reshapes your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who endures everything to be accepted. You see yourself as someone who chooses carefully. That shift builds quiet confidence. It tells you that your value is not dependent on any single job, relationship, or opportunity. It is rooted in your standards and your willingness to protect them. And as that confidence grows, your presence grows heavier. You are not loud about your expectations. You are consistent with them. This consistency changes how others approach you. They understand that access to you is not guaranteed. They understand that respect is required. And even if some people walk away when you raise your standards, the ones who remain will meet you at a higher level, because they see that you are not desperate, you are deliberate, and deliberate people carry weight. When you combine this ability to walk away with disciplined time, measured words, and controlled reactions, something powerful begins to form. You are no longer reacting to the world in search of approval. You are shaping your world through selection. And that selection is what continues to raise your value in every area that follows. But here is the part most people avoid. None of this works if it is an act. You can slow your replies. You can speak less. You can pretend to be selective. But if inside you are still craving attention, approval, reassurance, it leaks. It shows up in your tone. It shows up in your body language. It shows up in the way you glance at your phone, hoping for validation. People feel it, even if they cannot explain it. Scarcity performed from insecurity feels tense. It feels forced. Real value does not feel forced. It feels calm. It feels grounded. That calmness can only come from inner change, not surface tactics. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Many people think they are simply unlucky. They think they are surrounded by people who undervalue them. They think opportunities just never seem to respect them. But often, the pattern is internal. The desire to be liked, the fear of being alone, the need to feel chosen. These forces operate quietly beneath the surface. They shape decisions. They influence tone. They guide behavior without permission. And when those forces are running the show, you will unconsciously trade yourself at a discount. You will say yes when you want to say no. You will stay when you need to leave. You will explain when silence would be stronger. Awareness is uncomfortable. It forces you to see the parts of yourself that seek approval at any cost. It forces you to admit that sometimes you overextend because you fear rejection. It forces you to acknowledge that you may be chasing validation under the disguise of kindness. That realization can sting, but it is also freeing, because once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. Once you understand that your behavior is driven by hidden fears, you can choose differently. You are no longer at the mercy of unconscious impulses. You become deliberate. Ask yourself honestly where you are giving yourself away for crumbs, not in dramatic situations but in small ones. Where do you lower your standard just to feel included? Where do you overperform just to feel secure? Where do you tolerate less than you deserve because the alternative feels uncertain? These are not accusations, they are invitations to clarity. And clarity is powerful. When you identify these patterns, you stop blaming fate. You stop blaming other people. You begin working on the one thing you can control, yourself. Discipline is the next step. Awareness without discipline changes nothing. You can recognize your tendencies, but if you continue acting on them, the pattern remains. Discipline means aligning your actions with your standards even when it feels uncomfortable. It means saying no when your voice trembles slightly. It means walking away even when loneliness whispers in your ear. It means holding silence when you want to explain yourself desperately. Over time, these small acts of discipline reshape your identity. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to feel stronger. Not because others validate you, but because you validated your own boundaries. This is where the transformation becomes real. When your behavior consistently reflects your standards, your identity shifts naturally. You stop trying to appear valuable. You stop crafting an image of strength. You simply live in alignment. That alignment creates a different energy. It feels steady. It feels authentic. There is no tension in it because it is not an act. You are no longer pretending to be selective while secretly hoping to be chaste. You are selective because it aligns with your self-respect. You are calm because you have trained your mind. You are measured because you understand your worth. People respond differently to that kind of presence. They sense when someone is not performing. They sense when someone is not fishing for approval. That steadiness creates gravity. You do not need to advertise your standards, you embody them. And embodiment is powerful because it cannot be easily imitated. It is built through repetition, through quiet decisions made when no one is watching, through moments where you choose dignity over comfort. There will still be doubts. There will still be moments when you question whether you are being too distant, too firm, too selective. But those doubts are part of growth. The old version of you will try to pull you back into familiar patterns. That is natural. Change always feels uncertain at first. What matters is consistency. Each time you choose alignment over approval, you strengthen the new identity. Each time you resist the urge to discount yourself, you reinforce your value internally. Eventually, something subtle but profound happens. You stop measuring your worth by how others react. Their praise feels pleasant but not necessary. Their criticism feels informative but not defining. Your sense of value stabilizes. It is no longer swinging with every interaction. And when your value stabilizes internally, it naturally rises externally, because people respect what respects itself. This shift cannot be faked. It cannot be forced through surface techniques. It grows from self-awareness and discipline practiced over time. And once it takes root, it influences every area of your life. Your time is guarded. Your words are intentional. Your reactions are measured. Your standards are firm. All of it flows from the inside out. When the inside is aligned, the outside follows naturally. And that internal alignment is what makes everything else sustainable as you continue stepping into the next level of strength. As you build this new posture, something uncomfortable begins to happen. The shift is quiet at first, almost subtle. A few messages go unanswered longer than before. A few invitations are declined without apology. A few conversations end sooner than they used to, and then you notice it. Some people drift away. They say you've changed. They say you're distant. They say you're harder to reach. And if you are honest, they are right. You are harder to reach because access is no longer free. You are no longer offering unlimited entry into your time, your thoughts, your emotional space. What once flowed without resistance now moves with intention, and not everyone appreciates that shift. At first, this can feel unsettling. You might question yourself. You might wonder if you are becoming cold or selfish. But look deeper. The old version of you was easy to access because you were afraid to lose connection. The new version values alignment over approval. That difference matters. When access is unlimited, it is rarely respected. When something requires effort, when it requires consideration, it gains weight. That is not cruelty. It is human nature. People tend to invest more in what is not automatically available, and when they invest more, the connection becomes stronger. Here is the paradox. The fewer people who have unlimited access to you, the more meaningful your connections become. When you stop spreading your attention thin across everyone, you have more depth to offer the few who truly align. Conversations become richer. Presence becomes focused. Loyalty becomes intentional rather than automatic. You no longer seek to be valued by the entire room. You seek to be aligned with those who respect your standards. That alignment is rare, but rarity creates value. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." That advice is simple, yet powerful. When you guard your time and emotional space, you naturally filter your environment. The ones who resent your boundaries often benefited from your lack of them. The ones who respect your limits tend to value growth, clarity, and mutual respect. Over time, your circle becomes smaller, but stronger. It becomes less about quantity and more about quality. And that shift changes how you feel inside. You feel less drained, less scattered, more focused. Being selective is not arrogance, it is intentionality. Arrogance seeks superiority. Intentionality seeks alignment. There is a difference. You are not claiming to be better than others. You are recognizing that your attention, your time, your emotional stability are finite resources. And finite resources, when guarded wisely, become powerful. When you treat your energy as limited and valuable, you begin to allocate it carefully. You no longer pour it into every passing interaction. You invest it where there is reciprocity, where there is growth, where there is respect. As this pattern continues, something inside you stabilizes. You stop fearing distance. You stop chasing people who drift away. You begin to understand that not every departure is a loss. Sometimes it is a refinement. When someone leaves because you raised your standards, that is information. It tells you they were comfortable with the version of you that overgave, and when someone stays, adapting to your new posture, that tells you something as well. It tells you they value you enough to meet you where you stand. There is a calm confidence that grows from this process. You are no longer trying to hold on to everyone. You are allowing space for the right people to remain. That space can feel empty at first. Silence where there used to be noise. Fewer messages, fewer social obligations. But in that quiet, you rediscover yourself. You reconnect with your own priorities. You begin to enjoy your own rhythm. That enjoyment makes you less dependent on constant interaction. And when you are less dependent, you are less controllable. Over time, this intentional posture shapes your reputation. People begin to understand that your attention is not automatic, that your presence is deliberate. They adjust their behavior accordingly. Conversations become more respectful. Commitments become more serious, because they sense that you are not afraid to withdraw if something no longer aligns. That willingness to withdraw is not dramatic. It is steady, it is quiet, and it is powerful. The interesting part is that you do not need to advertise this shift. You do not need to announce new rules. Your behavior communicates everything. When you decline without guilt, when you prioritize without apology, when you remain composed even as others react, your identity becomes clear. And clarity commands respect. The people who truly value you will not be threatened by your boundaries. They will appreciate them. Because strong boundaries create strong relationships. As you continue forward, you will notice that your life feels more intentional. Fewer distractions, Fewer shallow interactions, more depth, more focus, more alignment, and that alignment reinforces your value from within. You no longer measure yourself by how many people can access you. You measure yourself by how well your life reflects your standards. That internal alignment is what sustains everything else. It ensures that the value you build is not temporary or performative, but rooted and steady, and from that rooted place, you are ready to step even further into the kind of presence that carries weight without demanding attention. At the end of the day, this is not about being distant. It is not about being feared. It is about standing in your own weight. It is about knowing that your time, your words, your reactions, and your standards are not for casual consumption. When you stop giving yourself away in pieces, you begin to feel whole. And when you feel whole, the world responds differently. If something shifted in you while listening, don't let it fade. There's another video waiting for you on the screen that goes even deeper into building that unshakable inner core. Watch it next and continue strengthening the part of you that refuses to be discounted. Thank you for being part of Stoic Journal.